The maximum set, a wing of Eastridge Correctional Facility, operated like clockwork. But for Tyler and Kane, this rigid environment became the unlikely place for the start of their relationship, a story that would ultimately end in a gruesome crime scene. The prison, a sprawling concrete complex hidden in the rural outskirts of the state, housed over 1,300 inmates, most serving sentences of 12 years or more. Among them, Tyler and Kane found each other, a connection that provided rare comfort in an environment designed to strip away humanity. But what began as mutual protection and emotional solace would spiral into obsession, jealousy, and finally, murder. Tyler entered Eastridge in 2018, sentenced to 14 years for armed robbery. At 30, he was no stranger to incarceration, having served shorter sentences at other facilities. Broad, shouldered, and taciturn, he quickly established himself as someone not to be challenged. 3 months after Tyler's arrival, Kane was transferred to Eastridge from a medium security facility after a reclassification of his status. At 25, Kane had been incarcerated since age 23 for drug trafficking. Unlike Tyler, Kane presented as feminine, identifying as a transgender woman, despite being housed in a male facility. Among the population at Eastridge, Kane was known for meticulously maintained eyebrows, carefully styled hair, and handmade modifications to the standard issue uniform that subtly emphasized a feminine silhouette. The prison administration reluctantly accommodated some aspects of Kane's gender expression, allowing longer hair and permitting certain commissary items, while denying others, including hormone therapy. This half-acknowledged status created additional vulnerabilities in an already dangerous environment. According to inmates later interviewed, Tyler first noticed Kane in the recreation yard. Their initial interactions were observed as brief conversations that gradually extended over the following week. By the 1-month mark of their acquaintance, the two were regularly seen together during meals and free periods. Prison relationships form under extreme constraints. Physical contact is limited and surveilled. Privacy is nearly non-existent. Yet within these narrow confines, inmates create intimate bonds that follow their own unwritten rules and rituals. For Tyler and Kane, their relationship began as a mutual protection arrangement, common enough in prison ecosystems, but evolved into something deeper. Tyler provided physical protection. Kane offered emotional support and affection rarely found in the hyper-masculine prison environment. They were tight, different from most hookups you see and hear, an inmate later told investigators. Tyler wasn't playing, and Kane wasn't just surviving. They actually cared about each other, at least at first. The prison staff noted the relationship in their reports, but took minimal action. Such arrangements were tolerated as long as they didn't disrupt the facility's operation or create security concerns. Indeed, stable relationships often reduced violence and disciplinary issues among participants. In the narrow window between dinner and lockdown, Tyler and Kane would sit at a corner table in the recreation room, sometimes simply talking, other times playing cards. During yard time, they walked the perimeter together. These small rituals established them as a recognized pair within the prison's social hierarchy. For nearly 14 months, their relationship appeared stable. Tyler displayed uncharacteristic patience and even gentleness with Kane. Kane, in turn, showed loyalty and provided emotional support during Tyler's failed appeal and denied parole hearing. The first signs of trouble emerged gradually. Corrections officers noted increased agitation in Tyler during the spring of 2019. His disciplinary record, previously unremarkable, began accumulating minor infractions, insubordination, unauthorized movement, contraband possession. Tyler started getting edgy, a guard later recalled. More territorial, watching Damson all the time. It was subtle at first, but anyone working the blocks long enough could see the change. The surveillance was initially dismissed as typical possessiveness, common enough in prison relationships where control often substitutes for trust. However, as weeks passed, Tyler's behavior intensified. During meals, he began positioning himself to maintain visual contact with Kane. He altered his work schedule in the laundry facility to align with Kane's movements. Prison records indicate 3 separate incidents where Tyler confronted other inmates who had engaged in extended conversations with Kane. None escalated to physical violence, but witnesses described the encounters as intense and threatening. Tyler thought he owned Kane, another inmate later testified. Couldn't handle seeing them talk to nobody else. It was getting weird, even for this place. Kane's response to this increasing surveillance appeared ambivalent. Some witnesses described efforts to reassure Tyler. Others recalled seeing Kane deliberately engaging with other inmates when Tyler was present, seemingly testing boundaries or asserting independence. This push-pull dynamic continued for approximately 3 months, with the relationship visibly deteriorating. Tyler became increasingly isolated, interacting almost exclusively with Kane and withdrawing from previous associations. Kane, conversely, expanded social connections, particularly with a group of inmates who gathered in the recreation yard. On June 12, 2019, the fragile equilibrium shattered. Security footage from that date shows Kane entering the cell of another inmate during an unauthorized period. The cell belonged to a recent transfer, a younger man serving his first sentence for financial fraud. Tyler,
working his shift in the laundry facility, was unaware of the meeting. However, as in most prisons, information traveled with remarkable efficiency. By that evening, multiple sources confirmed that Tyler had learned of the encounter. Surveillance footage from the dining hall shows an intense but whispered exchange between Tyler and Kane, ending with Kane walking away and Tyler remaining seated, motionless, for several minutes. Over the next 72 hours, their interaction ceased entirely. Kane was observed spending time with the new inmate and other associates. Tyler remained isolated, declining even to leave his cell for some meals, behavior flagged in the daily reports, but deemed insufficient for intervention. On June 15th, a corrections officer noted in the daily log that Tyler requested an unscheduled shower period, citing contamination from a laundry chemical spill. The request was granted, a seemingly minor deviation from protocol that would later be scrutinized in multiple internal investigations. The Eastridge shower facilities occupy a tiled room divided into 6 individual stalls, with waist-high partitions and no doors, offering minimal privacy while allowing guards visual access during their regular patrols. The schedule allocates shower access by cell block, with strict time limits enforced. On the afternoon of June 15th, Kane entered the shower area during DB Block's designated period.
According to the facility's records, 6 other inmates were present initially, but 5 had finished and departed by 2:47 p.m., leaving Kane alone. The guard responsible for monitoring had stepped away to respond to a disturbance in an adjacent corridor. At 2:53 p.m., Tyler entered the shower area, ostensibly for his approved unscheduled shower. Surveillance footage from the corridor shows him entering empty-handed. The shower area itself had no cameras, a security gap repeatedly identified in previous facility audits but never addressed due to budget constraints. What happened next was reconstructed through forensic evidence and partial witness accounts. Tyler approached Kane in the shower stall furthest from the entrance. No verbal exchange was overheard by the one remaining inmate, who was finishing dressing near the exit. The attack was swift and methodical, using a prison-made weapon, a toothbrush with a razor blade melted into the handle. Tyler stabbed Kane multiple times in the neck and upper torso. The medical examiner would later identify 17 distinct wounds, with the fatal injury severing the carotid artery. The other inmate, hearing the struggle, exited the shower area without raising an alarm, a decision he later justified as self-preservation. You don't get involved, you don't see nothing, that's how you survive. It was 3:07 out of midnight when the guard returned and discovered Kane's body.
Blood had spread across the tiled floor, diluted by the still-running shower. Tyler was gone, having returned to his assigned work detail in the laundry, where he resumed his duties as if nothing had happened. The facility immediately implemented lockdown procedures. All inmates were confined to their cells as a team of state investigators arrived at the scene. The shower area was secured, though valuable evidence had already been compromised by the running water and the delayed discovery. Kane was pronounced dead at the scene. His body, still partially clothed in prison-issued shower sandals and shorts, was photographed extensively before removal. Blood spatter analysis later indicated that the attack had been frontal, the assailant facing the victim, and that Kane had been conscious and struggling during at least the initial stab wounds. The investigation quickly shifted from an open inquiry to a focused case. Tyler's unscheduled shower, his documented history with the victim, and their deteriorating relationship made him an immediate person of interest. His cell was searched within hours of the murder. Inside a small gap in the concrete wall, concealed behind a carefully positioned photograph, investigators discovered the weapon. Blood residue, despite obvious cleaning attempts, matched Kane's DNA. Additional blood traces were found on a pair of shower sandals, hidden beneath Tyler's mattress. When confronted with the evidence, Tyler offered no resistance or denial. "He shouldn't have disrespected me," he reportedly told investigators, refusing to elaborate further or provide a formal statement without representation. As the investigation expanded, a more complex picture of their relationship and the institutional environment emerged. Interviews with other inmates revealed that Kane's interactions with the new inmate had become sexual in nature, a fact widely known throughout the facility. Kane was playing a dangerous game, one long-term inmate explained. Everyone could see it. You don't disrespect someone like Tyler in here and think there won't be consequences. But Kane wanted to prove something. That they couldn't be controlled. That they had choices even in here. The prison administration faced difficult questions about the supervision failures that had allowed the murder to occur. The unscheduled shower approval. The guard's absence from his post. The unmonitored area, all represented major institutional breakdowns. Internal memos uncovered during the investigation revealed that staff had documented concerns about Tyler's behavior in the weeks leading up to the murder. One counselor had specifically noted obsessive tendencies and possible delusional jealousy in a report filed just 10 days before the killing. The report had been reviewed, but was deemed insufficient to warrant intervention or separation. The case never went to public trial. Tyler accepted a plea agreement, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. The weapon, the premeditation evidenced by the requested shower time, and the brutality of the attack left little room for mitigating factors. For East Ridge Correctional Facility, the murder triggered a comprehensive security review. Cameras were finally installed in shower areas, albeit with privacy modifications. Policies regarding relationship monitoring and intervention were strengthened. 3 staff members, including the supervisor who approved the unscheduled shower, were terminated for negligence. Kane's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the state's Department of Corrections, citing negligence and failure to protect. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. As part of the settlement, the department agreed to review and enhance its policies regarding transgender inmates, including improved screening processes for potential threats. The facility's LGBTQ inmate support group, which neither Tyler nor Kane had participated in, saw its membership double in the months following the murder. The group's coordinator, a civilian contractor, reported that the tragedy had prompted many inmates to seek community and safe discussion spaces they had previously avoided. The murder at East Ridge Correctional Facility represents more than just another statistic in America's prison violence epidemic. It illuminates the complex intersections of identity, desire, control, and institutional failure within a system designed for punishment rather than rehabilitation. For Tyler and Kane, prison became not just a place of confinement, but a crucible that concentrated and intensified human emotions to deadly effect. Their relationship, beginning in mutual need, evolving through genuine connection, and ending in violence, followed a trajectory shaped by both personal psychology and institutional constraints. What might have developed differently in another context became, within prison walls, a fatal equation of possession, jealousy, and revenge. The surveillance cameras, guard rotations, and security protocols that governed their physical movements proved wholly inadequate to manage the volatile emotions that ultimately led to murder. As one investigating officer noted in his final report, "The system is designed to control bodies, not hearts or minds. That's where it always breaks down." Today, nearly 5 years after the murder, Tyler remains in solitary confinement at a different maximum security facility. Kane's personal effects, a few photographs, letters, and handmade jewelry crafted from permitted materials, were returned to family members who had maintained only sporadic contact during his incarceration. In the shower area at East Ridge, new tiling has replaced the blood-stained originals. New cameras monitor from discrete ceiling mounts. New policies govern inmate movements and relationships. Yet beneath these surface changes, the same fundamental tensions persist. Human needs and emotions contained within a system ill-designed to accommodate them. The tragic end of Tyler and Kane's relationship stands as a stark reminder of this unresolved contradiction. A single case illustrating broader truths about punishment, identity, and the human capacity for both connection and destruction, even in the most controlled environments. Transition to new storyline. At Ravencrest Penitentiary, a new relationship between Damien and Darius would take root, flourish briefly, and ultimately end in blood. From the outside, Ravencrest resembled a massive gray fortress, its perimeter defined by 30-foot walls topped with spirals of razor wire that gleamed like deadly tinsel in the sunlight. Guard towers punctuated each corner, staffed by officers armed with shotguns and binoculars. Beyond the main entry checkpoint, the facility was organized into 8 housing blocks, each containing 120 cells arranged in 2 tiers. In this rigidly controlled environment, time passed according to institutional rhythms. Wake-up calls at 5:30 a.m., meals at precisely scheduled intervals, recreation periods portioned out like rare commodities, lights out at 10 p.m. Yet within these mechanical constraints, human connections formed, as inevitable and predictable as water finding cracks in concrete. Damien arrived at Ravencrest in January 2019, sentenced to 20 years for armed robbery and aggravated assault. At 35, Damien had spent nearly half his life cycling through the criminal justice system. juvenile detention, county lockups, state prisons. In prison facilities, the pattern had become almost ritualistic: incarceration, release, brief freedom, return. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders and arms covered in tattoos chronicling his interrupted life, Damien projected a physical confidence that commanded immediate respect within the prison hierarchy. Yet, those who interacted with him noted an unexpected stillness, a quality of watchful patience, rare in a place where aggression was often the default language. Damien keeps to himself, follows rules, doesn't cause trouble, one guard noted in an early evaluation. Potential model inmate, if he maintains current behavior. 4 months after Damien's arrival, Darius was transferred to Ravencrest from a medium security facility, following a system-wide redistribution of inmates. At 29, Darius was serving a 12-year sentence for narcotics distribution, already 5 years into the term. Where Damien was physically imposing, Darius was slight, standing barely 5 feet 9 inches with a slender build. Where Damien was reserved, Darius was expressive, known for a disarming smile that seemed incongruous with their grim surroundings. And where Damien's presentation was conventionally masculine, Darius identified openly as a transgender woman, despite being housed in a male facility. Darius's transfer documentation included notes about her gender identity, with recommendations for specific accommodations, recommendations that Ravencrest struggled to implement consistently within their limited options. Still, Darius maintained feminine grooming standards: shaped eyebrows, short but styled hair, and subtle adaptations to the standard uniform. Darius requires additional monitoring for safety concerns. Read the intake assessment. Previous facility reports indicate vulnerability to targeted harassment. Their first interaction occurred in the prison library, a small but carefully maintained space overseen by a civilian employee who prided herself on creating what she called an island of normalcy within the facility. Damien had secured a coveted position as a library assistant, responsible for reshelving books and maintaining the simple catalog system. Darius began visiting the library during B Block's designated hours, initially browsing fashion magazines and contemporary fiction. Security footage from these early encounters shows brief, seemingly casual interactions: books passed, shelving explained, catalog consulted. For 3 weeks, these encounters remained professional and limited. Then, as documented in the library sign-in logs, Darius began arriving earlier during scheduled periods and staying longer. Surveillance footage captured conversations extending beyond library matters, though the content remained unrecorded. By the 6th week of Darius's transfer, other inmates had noticed the connection. Prison social dynamics react quickly to new alliances, particularly those that cross usual tribal boundaries of race, criminal history, or prison occupation. Everyone could see something was happening there, one inmate later told investigators. Damien had never paid special attention to anyone before. Then suddenly he's spending every library shift talking to Darius. Around here, that's like taking out a billboard announcement. The prison grapevine, always efficient, circulated various theories about their relationship. Some dismissed it as a business arrangement, protection in exchange for commissary items or other services. Others recognized the emotional component developing between the two inmates. For their part, Damien and Darius maintained public discretion. Their interactions in common areas remained casual, though observers noted meaningful glances and a constant awareness of each other's location, a deeper connection lurking beneath the surface. What transformed speculation into certainty was discovered during a routine cell inspection in August 2019. A correctional officer, searching Damien's cell, found a 3-page letter hidden inside a hollowed-out legal reference book. Written in Darius's distinctive handwriting on paper torn from a composition notebook, the letter detailed feelings and hopes in language that left no ambiguity about the relationship's nature. Protocol required confiscation of unauthorized correspondence, with disciplinary reports filed for both parties. However, the senior officer on duty, a 20-year veteran of the correctional system, made a rare exception. "I've seen what happens when you disrupt these arrangements," he later explained off the record. "Sometimes the stability they provide prevents worse problems." Damien was behaving. Darius was safer than before. The letter went back where I found it. This unofficial sanction, or at least tolerance, allowed the relationship to develop further, though always constrained by the brutal realities of incarceration. Physical contact remained limited to brief touches during meal periods or recreation time. Privacy was non-existent. Their emotional intimacy had to exist primarily through conversations in monitored spaces and carefully exchanged notes. For nearly 8 months, the relationship appeared to provide mutual benefits. Damien experienced a reduction in disciplinary incidents, channeling his focus into protecting Darius, and maintaining his library position. Darius found a measure of safety in a dangerous environment, an emotional connection in a place designed to prevent it. Corrections officers informally acknowledged the arrangement, sometimes assigning the two to the same work details or recreation periods, not out of support for the relationship, but recognition of its stabilizing effects. You learn to work with the reality in front of you, a supervising officer later testified. Damien and Darius weren't causing problems. That's rare enough that you don't interfere without good reason. The first significant strain appeared in March 2019, when the facility implemented distancing protocols. Library services were suspended. Recreation periods were staggered to reduce crowding. Meals were delivered to cells rather than served in the communal dining hall. These measures, while medically necessary, severely limited contact between inmates housed in different blocks. Damien and Darius, assigned to A block and B block respectively, suddenly found themselves separated by more than just cell walls. Their primary meeting locations were no longer accessible. Communication channels narrowed to occasional glimpses during modified movement periods, and notes passed through the increasingly valuable network of inmate messengers. Prison records indicate that Damien's behavior changed during this period of separation. His previously exemplary work performance declined. He received citations for being out of authorized areas, always locations that might allow visual contact with B block. His formerly quiet demeanor shifted toward irritability. Damien is expressing frustration with restrictions, noted a counselor's report. Recommend monitoring for potential escalation. When limited interblock recreation resumed in June 2019, security footage captured their reunion, a brief conversation in the yard, standing closer than social distancing guidelines permitted, speaking intently for the entire 30-minute period. However, the 3 months of separation had created space for change. According to multiple accounts, Darius had formed new associations during the restricted period, particularly with a group of younger inmates recently transferred from another facility. Records from the post-rest period showed Darius increasingly dividing social time between Damien and the new group. Surveillance footage captured extended conversations between Darius and an inmate named Calvin during meals and recreation periods, sometimes within Damien's line of sight. You could feel the tension building, recalled an inmate who shared a work assignment with Damien. Damien would just stop whatever he was doing and stare across the yard when Darius was talking to these other inmates. Not saying anything, just watching. Getting darker every day. On August 17, 2019, a critical fee incident occurred in the laundry facility, where both Damien and Darius had recently been assigned. According to the official report, Damien confronted Darius about the relationship with Calvin, leading to a heated exchange witnessed by at least 4 other inmates. No physical altercation took place, but the verbal intensity prompted staff intervention and the temporary reassignment of both inmates to separate work details. During a subsequent cell search, officers discovered a makeshift weapon hidden inside Damien's mattress, a toothbrush with its end melted and embedded with a razor blade, a common prison weapon. While Damien denied any knowledge of the item, the discovery resulted in 2 weeks of disciplinary segregation. Upon his return to the general population in early September, Damien initially appeared calmer. He resumed his previous routines, regained library privileges as COVID-19 restrictions continued easing, and made no attempts to contact Darius directly. This apparent acceptance was misinterpreted by both staff and fellow inmates. What appeared to be resignation was instead calculated withdrawal. Damien was planning. The truth about what happened during those 2 weeks in segregation emerged only after subsequent events. Damien's cellmate during that period later revealed that Damien had spent hours silently staring at the wall, occasionally murmuring the same phrase, "Can't let it happen again." The cryptic statement referenced the pattern in Damien's life, abandonment and betrayal, that had defined his relationships since childhood. Court psychologists had previously documented this trauma response in evaluations conducted during his earlier convictions. For Damien, Darius's perceived rejection was triggering a psychological response far more complex than simple jealousy. All maximum security prisons contain blind spots, areas where surveillance cameras have limited coverage, or where architectural features create shattered zones. At Ravencrest, one such area was the corner of the recreation yard, where an equipment shed created a triangular space partially obscured from both camera coverage and direct line of sight from the guard posts. This surveillance gap was well known to long-term inmates, who referred to it simply as the blind spot. It was typically used for quick contraband exchanges or brief private conversations. Using this area for extended periods invited staff attention, but momentary occupation rarely triggered concern. On September 28, 2019, Recreation period logs showed that Damien, Darius, and Calvin were all present in the yard during B Block's scheduled time. Damien had obtained permission to retrieve materials from the groundskeeping shed, an errand that legitimately placed him in the yard during a period when he would normally be restricted to his cell block. Surveillance footage captured Damien entering the yard at 2:17 p.m., acknowledging the supervising officer and proceeding to the equipment shed at 2:19 p.m. Darius was seen separating from a group of inmates and walking toward the same area. Calvin remained with the group, engaged in a basketball game. What transpired next occurred in the surveillance gap. The equipment shed camera had been reported malfunctioning 3 days earlier, with replacement parts still pending. The nearest functional camera captured only Damien's entry into the blind spot, and, 4 minutes later, his exit alone at 2:26 p.m. An inmate discovered Darius's body behind the equipment shed. Emergency response protocols were immediately activated, but medical personnel pronounced Darius dead at the scene. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds to the neck and torso, with the fatal injury penetrating the heart. Ravencrest immediately implemented a facility-wide lockdown. All inmates were returned to their cells, as state investigators and the medical examiner arrived. The crime scene was secured, though crucial minutes had elapsed between the murder and its discovery. The weapon, a sharpened steel rod fashioned from a piece of bed frame, was found discarded in a trash receptacle 30 yards from the scene. Despite evident wiping, blood residue in the metal's grooves matched Darius's DNA. Damien returned to his cell during the lockdown and made no attempt to conceal his involvement. When investigators questioned him 3 hours later, his statement, recorded in the case file, was chilling in its emotional detachment. Had to be done. Some things you can't let stand. Not in here. The investigation revealed the full dimension of what had triggered the murder. In the days preceding,